Added on. Peter, don't come out here on me. But anyway, Jerusalem was occupied by the Canaanites in its earliest history, and we learned that from a reference from to its governor in the Tel Amarna tablets by the Egyptian Pharaoh in about 1360 BC. Now, when we look at Jerusalem, and when we read about Jerusalem, how do you recall that it's always described when you're going to Jerusalem? You're going up. Doesn't matter if you're in Tyre. If you're going to go to Jerusalem, you're going to go up to Jerusalem because it's elevated. It's high. Okay? Jerusalem is 2,460 feet above sea level. Now, when we look at... let me make sure I got my... Whoop, let me back up. Okay. Golly. I'm sorry, Roger. Keep hitting the wrong one. We see the Mediterranean Sea here. The Mediterranean Sea is about 36 miles from Jerusalem. Okay? It is 14 miles from the northern end of the Dead Sea right here. So it's about 14 miles from that. Also, it is about 5 miles from Bethlehem. Okay, of course we know Bethlehem is the birthplace of the Christ. And now it's also 120 miles south of Mount Hermon. Okay, Mount Hermon is up here. Now Mount Hermon is very likely the spot of the Transfiguration that we read about, where Peter, James, and John went up and they saw Jesus communing with the great lawgiver Moses and Elijah. Now, is Jerusalem, when we look at Jerusalem, it is a city that is beloved by 3 religions. It's beloved by those who claim to be Jews today. I say that because obviously there are those who practice Judaism today. But it's hard to practice Judaism today because if you look at your time frame outline that I handed out, you look down to AD 70, Titus marched into Rome or marched into Jerusalem and completely destroyed the temple. And when he completely destroyed the temple, he destroyed all the records in the temple. And that meant he destroyed the genealogies. Okay? And if you destroyed the genealogies, that meant they could not determine from which tribe they came. Okay? And what did that mean? You couldn't tell if you're from the tribe of Levi. If you couldn't tell if you're from the tribe of Levi, you can't tell if you're a priest. Okay? So if you can't determine the priestly tribes, that effectively destroyed Judaism. Okay? But are they fighting over it in the Middle East right now over Jerusalem? They're still fighting over it today. The Jews are fighting over it. The Muslims are fighting over it. Now, Christians aren't fighting over it. But does it mean something to the Christian faith? It means something to us, doesn't it? Because it is a part of our history. Now, does it go beyond a part of our history? Do we look forward to setting up a kingdom in Jerusalem? No. No. It doesn't go beyond our history. Okay? But it does mean something to us. We need to know about it. We need to learn some things about it, okay? Now, again, because of political reasons and religious reasons, it continues to be a site of unrest and battles. Jesus was crucified outside the walls of Jerusalem. Now, when you look at this map, and a lot of this is according to history, not biblical history, but secular history. And we're not for sure exactly if this is the case, but he very well could have been crucified in this area outside the city. Okay? This area right here. When we look up in this corner. Okay? That's interesting to know if you enjoy history. And so we do not know where the grave was. And you can go visit over in that part of the world, and they'll take you to the garden grave. And they'll tell you this is where the Lord was laid to rest. No one has any idea where the Lord was laid to rest. Okay? But you can go visit this spot if you want to. Now, Jerusalem also is very important to us in the sense that Christ died in Jerusalem, but the main thing is what happened 3 days later. He rose 3 days later. Okay? Now, on the first Pentecost following that death, what happened? We read about in Acts chapter 2. The church was established. Now, we're going to talk about this a little later on, but let me get out of the way here. This is called the Terrapin Valley, okay? We're going to talk about some of the layout of the city, because the city was built on 4 hills, okay? And if you got hills, you're going to have valleys, okay? And you can see here where the Sanhedrin Council would have met, and we read about a lot of that in the book of Acts, where Paul stood before the Sanhedrin Council. And we're going to notice here in a little while, hopefully, that great sermon that was preached very likely would have been preached right around in this area right here. Okay? Because of some of the structures in that area. Okay? According not to biblical history, we're looking at secular history from people like Josephus and others. Okay? And we're looking at some of these other places. But that's important, and that's interesting to understand when we look back and we read about that sermon preached on the day of Pentecost, and probably 2 or 3 million people coming in for this Passover. We understand that this is where this is taking place, okay, in this area. Now, the name Jerusalem wasn't always called Jerusalem. You probably need to remember 3 names. Okay, I don't know what all Ron's going to ask of you, but you're probably going to need to remember 3 names. You're going to need to remember the name Salem. Okay, that's the first name that we run into. Who do we remember attached to that name Salem? We read about him in the book of Hebrews. Melchizedek, he was both king and priest, right? Abraham ran into him, I think, in Genesis chapter 22. He paid tithes to him. Abraham had to go rescue Lot, some of the other folks in the cities of the plain, and he runs into Melchizedek, and he pays tithes to him. Okay? Salem, this is where it happened, right here in this area. Now, it's also known as Jebus, or Jebus, Jebas. Okay? Now, over time, those names kind of melded, and it became known as Jerusalem. Okay? Jerusalem. It's been known by several other names over history and over time. But if you can remember Salem, Jebus, and Jerusalem, that will probably be sufficient for this class. Judges 19, verse 10 is where you find that name Jebus. Okay? Now, the size of the city. This is kind of an interesting statistic, the size of the city. Now, this comes from Josephus again. I don't know if we have an exact, didn't really look, but I don't know that we have an exact measurement of Jerusalem proper in the New Testament or in the Old Testament. But Josephus tells us altogether the city was only 33 stadia, or about 4 English miles in circumference. Okay? So that's not a real big city. Now, within that compass dwelled a population of about 600,000. Now, we're talking about during the time of Jesus, okay? This is where these statistics come from, during the time of Jesus. Now, that was according to Tacitus, okay? he was a historian as well. Now, according to Josephus, at the time of Passover, 2 to 3 million people would come in. Okay, so when Peter was preaching his sermon, there were 2 to 3 million folks. That doesn't mean 2 to 3 million came out to listen to him, but there were 2 to 3 million Jews who came to listen or came to observe the Passover feast, and a great many of them would have come out to this area, right in this area, that would have listened to those apostles as they preached the first sermon. Now, that's about 2 to 3. That's about somewhere close to probably the population of London. Maybe London's a little bigger than that. You know. So that's pretty good when you come in and you know, for an event. For an event, I think Memphis has about 1 million, a little over 1 million population. Any comments, questions so far? Now, when you, if you're living in Israel, the climate is it's not real extreme weather. They have cold winters. The coldest you're going to run into is probably about 25 degrees in the winter months. Okay, you're going to get some snow there, but you're not going to get in the low areas. Okay, we're talking about well, you're going to get some snow in the city of Jerusalem. In Israel itself, in some of the lower areas, you may not get as much, but you're going to get some snow in this area. Now, you're going to get a lot of snow up on Mount Hermon in some of the higher elevations, because that's where the snow melts, it comes down, and it feeds into the Jordan River, and it comes on down, and that's where they get a lot of their water, because their rain is only about 26 inches of rain a year. And they only get that in their winter months, 3 months out of the year. It's not really evened out over the course of the year. They normally get that only during their 3 winter months. Okay, but in the months of August, their highs are about 73, but it can get up to about 100 in September. Okay, so it can get up to about 100 sometimes. Their high can be up to 100. Now, Jerusalem, we talked about their mountains, okay? It's built on 4 hills, but there are about 7 hills in the immediate area, or 7 mountains, okay? But it is built or enclosed by a rough triangle of mountain ridges, okay? And which break the city into 5 main divisions described by Josephus. We're going to look at those. I'm going backwards. I put this in here just so you can kind of see the topography a little bit, kind of give you an idea of how it's not flat. You've got these valleys and the peaks in it. Okay, just kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. That's just a model that someone made there. Now, what you see here is Mount Zion, and right across from Mount Zion, and we'll show this just a little bit. This is just more of an actual photo. Is the Mount of Olives. We're very familiar with the Mount of Olives. We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. These are the divisions, okay, and of the mountains. Let me just point these out to you, and we'll get to a better picture here in a moment. You have Mount Zion right here, Mount Ophel right here, Mount Moriah, that's where the temple is, okay, and Mount Acra is right here. Those are the 4 hills. They call them the 4 hills. It's Hill Acra and Hill Ophel, okay. You have Mount Moriah, Mount Zion, but then you also have the Mount of Olives over here. And the Mount of I think it's Mount Moriah. It's in my notes. We'll get to it in a moment. Is the highest, I believe, but it's still, I think, 100 feet shorter than the Mount of Olives. Okay, of course, the Mount of Olives, we remember that. The Mount of Olives is where Jesus ascended back to heaven. All right. But anyway, let me describe these divisions to you. Okay? And you can see this is the modern Jerusalem here. You can see the difference in the size, but this is the modern Jerusalem. The divisions are the upper city or the marketplace, known as the southwestern hill. Then you have Acra, or the lower city, known as the southeastern hill. The Temple Hill, the central eastern section. The Bezetha, the newly built part of the city. Now that was the newly built part of the city in Josephus' day. Okay? So that's not newly built as far as we're concerned. The northern quarter, or the northwestern hill, in modern times. Okay? Those 5 divisions take a different designation in our time, but let me point out, well, I already pointed out these hills to you. You have Mount Zion, also known as the City of David. You have Mount Moriah, which is where the temple, you see the temple right here. Mount Ophel right below that. Mount Acra, or the hill of Acra right here. And now it was on Mount Moriah where the temple was built that Abraham was told to go offer his son Isaac. It says in the place of Moriah, or the area of Moriah, or something to that effect, but it's likely in that very area. Okay, Mount Moriah. And you can see it a little better right here. Here would be Moriah, and then right down to here would be Ophel. Now, all of these hills and mountains are peaks in a central range, of mountains that run through the middle of Canaan from north to south. Let's back up a little bit and look at a little better map we had from the beginning. Now, according to this other map, what you'd have to do is take this model and kind of turn it this way. This would be up on the north, because the temple here would have to be sitting right here, okay, if you wanted to set it the way the other map was. But let's kind of look at this map. Let's see, is this one we'll look at? Yeah, let's kind of leave it on that one for just a moment. But these hills, they run from north to south through the land of Canaan. And you can see the Gehenna, or Valley of Hinnom here. You're going to see Kidron, the Valley of Kidron right here. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But you see all these other roads leading out to Jericho, to Joppa, to Samaria, all these other places. To Gaza, to Hebron, to Bethlehem, Joppa, Caesarea, Samaria, Jericho, to Bethany. And all those are names that are familiar to us. And we see the location from Jerusalem. We're going to see Hezekiah's aqueduct. That's important to the city of Jerusalem. We read about that in the Old Testament. Okay? Again, when we look at Jerusalem, Jerusalem is about 2,500 feet above sea level. Okay? Jericho is 16 miles to the west. Okay? To the east, to the east. Jerusalem is to the west of Jericho. And it is 800 feet below sea level. Okay? Now, that's a difference of 3,300 feet between the two cities. So you see a big difference going from one to the other. So you go from Jericho, you're going up to Jerusalem. Okay? Now, again, valleys lie between the hills. on which Jerusalem is built. But here's the thing, over the years of Jerusalem being destroyed and built back and destroyed and built back, what has happened is a lot of those valleys have gotten filled in to where they are almost level, comparatively speaking, to what they were in comparison to these hills. So they're rebuilding homes and they're rebuilding walls on the top of these ruins. Okay, so they're almost level with the hills. Now notice again, you have this Valley of Hinnom. What was it known for? The trash dump, right? And it almost constantly had a fire burning. And Jesus used it as the example of hell, right? And where the worm dieth not, and all of those things. So that would have been right there, and that would have been a live illustration to make his point. And so that would have been right in their face, making that point. And east of Jerusalem was this Kidron Valley. Okay? Now this Kidron Valley was also known as the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And in it is the Kidron Brook. Okay, so you got some water over here. Now intersecting those two valleys, coming southward, we already mentioned it, the center of the city was the Tyropin Valley. And across from the Kidron Valley, we already talked about the Mount of Olives. It was right outside the city. Okay? And that was the spot from where Jesus ascended back to heaven. Because they left from the Mount of Olives and they went back to determine who was going to take Judas' place and make some of the decisions like that right prior to Acts chapter 2. Any comments? What you're going to notice here is you've got some walls around this city. Okay, you got some walls. Now in Jesus' day, there were only 2 walls. Okay, there were only 2 walls in Jesus' day. There would ultimately be 3 walls. Okay, but in Jesus' day, there were only 2 walls. Now the present walls of the city go all the way back to Suleiman the Magnificent, 1542 A.D. Okay, Suleiman the Magnificent of 1542 A.D. Now, in the present wall system, there are 8 existing gates. Okay, now, when you read through the Bible and you read through history regarding the Bible and geography, you always read about the gates. Something about a gate, right? A lot of things happened in the gate. When you read in the Old Testament, you conducted business in the gate, didn't you? You remember in the book of Ruth, right? Who'd she marry? She married Boaz. Now, Boaz was a near kinsman, right? But there was one other fella who was a little bit closer. So in order for Boaz to marry Ruth, he had to work out a business deal, didn't he? That took place in the gate. Take their shoe off, and they had some processes they went through, but that happened in the gate. They had different gates. Okay? Today, in the present wall system, there are 8 gates. On the west wall, you have the Jaffa gate. On the north wall, and I don't know that you'll have to know these, but I don't know exactly what Ron has in mind. But on the north wall, you have the Damascus gate, you have Herod's gate, and you have the New gate. On the east wall, you have the gate of tribes and the Golden gate. On the south wall, you have the Dung gate, right there it is, and the Zion gate. Okay? That's the present system. Now, of course, it was usual in ancient times, they had to build a wall system. That wall system was to keep out enemies. It was to keep out wild animals. It was to keep out anything you didn't want in. Okay? And in fact, the Israelites were unable to possess Jerusalem until the time of David. Okay, now Joshua went in with Israel and they took the land, but they didn't really follow through with what they were supposed to do, did they? They were never truly able to take the city until the time of David. And that's when David went in, took the city, but he had been king in Hebron for how long? 7 years, a little over 7 years, right? And so then he came in and he set up his capital in Jerusalem after that. But at one time, Jerusalem's walls prevented Assyria from taking the city, but Babylon and Rome came in and took the city. And you'll see those dates on your handout. They came in and Babylon did it twice. And they destroyed the city in spite of the walls. But between the conquest of Jerusalem by those two nations, Nehemiah led the Jews, and he came in and he rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. But again, during Jesus' day, the city only had 2 walls. And the third and largest wall would be built by Herod Agrippa 12 years after the crucifixion, if it happened around here. And it was this wall up here. It was the wall up here. The wall to the north. Now, the first of the old wall began at the northwestern angle of Zion at the Tower of Hippicus. I don't know if the Tower of Hippicus is on here. I don't think that's necessary to even know that, but I was going to try to point that out, and I don't think that's on here. Keep this, I meant to point this out. Xystus. This was like a Greek gymnasium, okay? And it was used for huge gatherings, okay? And that is one of the reasons that they think, that's what this is, that, and it was connected closely to where the Sanhedrin met, and that's why they think this area going all the way down into the Tyropoeon Valley may have been the area where the preaching went on the day of Pentecost. Okay, because that's where large crowds met for anything, for whatever happened, anything that was going on at that time in this area right here, and it went all the way down into the Tyropoeon Valley. And you know that anytime you're in a valley-shaped area, that makes for good acoustics, right? Makes for good acoustics. I have that every night at my house. I'm in a cove. I'm kind of go down into my house, and my neighbors, they can't hear me. I hear every conversation they have. I hear it, they turn the radio on. It's not real loud. I hear every song they have playing up there, But I can hear everything they're talking about. So anytime you're in kind of a valley, it's a natural acoustic. So that would lend itself to being able to preach, and for the people, particularly a large group like that, to be able to hear the message. Now, let's talk about some modern explorers for a moment. When I talk about modern explorers, we're talking about the 1800s when they first began to go in and kind of look at some things. So let's talk about some things they found. They found some very interesting things. But when they first prepared to excavate Jerusalem, there were some difficulties that kind of stood in their way. First of all, people had begun to, like everywhere else in the world, begun to build buildings. They began to have more of the modern things, just like they did in other places in the world. And so you couldn't just go in and start digging big holes in the ground and doing things like this. So you had to be very careful about where you were digging. And so, and here's something else. Over time, like we had mentioned, the city of Jerusalem itself had been besieged, it had been destroyed, it had been rebuilt back 40 or more times. So, the streets and the grounds where Jesus walked was about 35 feet below where everybody else was walking. And if you wanted to go back to where some of the Old Testament people walked, you had to go another 30 or more feet down below that. So you're talking about 65 feet or so if you want to go back to where some of the Old Testament prophets were walking around in Jerusalem. You know, if you wanted to go where Nathan was walking on his way over to tell David, "Thou art the man," you know, you had to dig down about 65 feet. And so that's what they had to do. They had to dig down. And so they went about doing that. But in about 1838, I don't know if this name, if you all care about this, but a man by the name of Dr. Edward Robinson discovered some curved stones, okay, which formed the spring of a 42-foot wide archway which projected from the southwest corner of the temple area. Okay? This is the temple area. So it projected from the southwest corner of the temple area. So I don't know if this is the porch, Solomon's porch. So I don't know if you're talking about this or this. But anyway, from that southwest corner. And some of the stones which made the arch were as much as 26 feet long. And now when you read about the temple, and you get over to Matthew chapter 24, and the disciples begin to question Jesus, and they want to know about when the end of time is, and they begin to ask, when will the temple be destroyed? Well, in their mind, the only thing that can destroy that temple is the end of time, because it was so huge. Now, they found some stones that were 26 feet. The temple actually had stones that were much larger than that. Okay, much larger than that. But that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. So they found this 25 and more feet down. Now, on the eastern portion of one of the series of arches that supported a bridge, which in Herod's time spanned this Tyropean Valley and connected the temple area on Mount Moriah with the western hill across the valley. So Herod had built a bridge that connected this temple area, okay, across this Tyropean Valley over onto the western side. You know, here's Herod's palace. So, you know, what his idea is, he wants to get across this valley. He wants to go from the palace over to the temple. Okay, so they found where he had erected a bridge. And they found some of those items. Again, years later, a man by the name of Charles Warren discovered another arch from the same wall, but 500 feet north of the previous arch, and it was similar, but there were a lot more stones, and it was also a base of a bridge across this Tyropean Valley, and it went across there. Now, in 1850, a large tomb complex was discovered and believed to be the tomb of the kings. Now, it turned out it wasn't the tomb of the kings. It turned out to be the mausoleum of Queen Helena. She was from Mesopotamia, and her descendants had been converted to Judaism. And it's right here. 1st century. And so she was a proselyte. In 1852, Joseph Barclay was... Now this is very interesting. You remember when reading about when King Solomon built the temple, and when they took the stones into the temple, there was no hammering or chiseling. They just took the stones from where they mined them and took them to the temple and placed them and put them in place. So whatever kind of trimming they did them where they mined them and chiseled them off, and they took them and set them in place in the temple. Well, they believe they found the spot where that happened. In 1852, Joseph Barclay was walking along the north wall of Jerusalem when his dog disappeared into a cave-like opening under the wall some 300 feet east of the Damascus Gate. So somewhere along this northern wall. Okay? So at that time, the wall wouldn't have been there. That wall would not have been there. But they very well could have done their work up there and carried these stones, or however they did it, to the place. He removed the debris around the opening and found that it was an entrance to a stratified limestone cave which extended southward under the city for about 700 feet. The markings along the side and end walls show the very shape and size of the building stones which had been quarried there, and they ran into the tens of thousands. The stones were soft and white, and there were piles of stone chippings and other evidences that led many to believe that they were Solomon's quarry, where his men shaped and dressed the stones and took them on sleds to the temple, and where the temple was constructed without the sound of hammer or axe, nor was any tool of iron heard in the house while it was built. 1 Kings 6:7. You know, now here's the point, and this is why studying biblical archaeology is worthwhile, is because it proves. Now, whether this particular instance is that, we have instances where archaeology has proven biblical fact. Okay, and you have to have that. Not for us, not for the Christian. We walk by faith, not by sight. But what do you tell the atheist? You can't begin to study with the atheist and say, "Hey, let's turn over here to Daniel chapter 8." That doesn't mean anything to the atheist, right? You have to start somewhere else. Okay, and that's understandable. You have to start somewhere else. You have to show them why they should listen to God's Word. We read that all through the New Testament. That's what the miracles were about, right? They demonstrated a miracle. That said, okay, this person is from God. He has a message worth listening to. And so that's what we have to do. And so that's why these things are worth our time to study when we're looking at geography and archaeology and things like that. Any comments or questions? A man by the name of Warren and another man by the name of Wilson began to drill down into the Tyropene Valley in 1865 with shafts 90 feet, okay? And they began to examine the underground temple walls, and they found evidences of the other walls where or portions where the ruins were, and walls built upon ruins. Okay, walls built upon ruins, and you won't go into a whole lot of detail there, but he did that in several different areas. He went down 90 feet, 100 feet, 125 feet at various intervals, and he found masonry that had been laid with precision that was only rivaled by the Egyptian pyramids. And so that's very interesting in this area of this Tyropene Valley. And I put this slide of this modern day wall on there just to give us an idea of what these walls would have, kind of give us an idea of what these walls would have looked at. You can see these stones. These are huge stones. Now, again, these walls date back to the 1400s. Okay, these aren't the walls. These aren't the walls. but they are similar to what those walls would have been. Now, here is something that again that points out, and we can connect this to a scripture in the Bible. In 1880, schoolboys were wading in the pool of Siloam. We're going to talk about some of these pools here in a moment. The pool of Siloam is right here. Pool of Bethsaida is right here. Okay, and those are pools that we read about Jesus using in his miracles. When one waded about 19 feet into the conduit, discovered some peculiar marks cut into the east rock wall above the water level. Marks that looked like writing. When they informed their teacher, these two men, they visited the spot, copied the inscription, and it consisted of 6 lines written in ancient Hebrew. Practically the same characters and alphabet as those used on the Moabite stone. The inscription read as follows. Now this is the story of boring through. While the excavators were still lifting up their picks, each toward his fellow, and while there were yet 3 cubits to excavate, there was heard the voice of one calling to another. For there was a crevice in the rock on the right hand, and on the day they completed the boring through, the stone cutters struck pick against pick, one against the other, and the waters flowed from the spring to the pool, a distance of 1,000 cubits, and 100 cubits was the height of the rock above the heads of the stone cutters. There was no explanation with the inscription, but none was needed. All of the authorities that had discovered this agreed that it was written about 702 BC. When Hezekiah, king of Judah, made the pool and a conduit and brought water into the city, 2 Kings 20, verse 20. And so we see architecture pointing right to history, biblical history. And he did that to connect the Gihon Spring right here, and he brought that into the inside, and we see it coming down through here and coming into here, into the pool of Siloam. Okay? And this is the lower old pool right here. And that was for the very purpose of when they seized the city, you can't go out to get water. And so that would allow that spring to bring water into the city, and now you have access to water at all times. And we read about that in the scripture. And we found it written on something here as these boys found it. Okay? Any comments? Question? Yeah. Well, the circumference was what is it, three or 4 miles. So that would be 4 miles from top to bottom. 3 to 4 miles from top to bottom. Right? No. Circumference is the circle around it. So that would be the circle around it would be the circumference is 4 miles. So it would be the center. So it's what? Oh, you had me excited there for a moment. Let me look here real quick. Where's my? Yeah, I'll find out right here. Yeah. Well, I don't want to know what New Jerusalem is. That's like 1,000,000 miles or something. We'll look that up. We'll look it up in a minute. We're about out of time here. Here's something I wanted to point out to you as well, but we'll get that. We'll find that out. Is Mount Olives. When we read about Jesus going out and them going out to the Mount of Olives, the Mount of Olives from the city wall to the Mount of Olives was about 3 football fields, about 1,000 yards. So to the first summit. So it's not that far. From the Temple Mount to the western base, it was about a half a mile. Okay. Now, by the nearest pathway, you're looking at 918 yards. If there was a longer footpath, about 1,300 yards. Okay. Now, Josephus calculated the distance from the city to the top at just a little over 1,000 yards. And so that obviously we can see that, it's right here. And here's the Garden of Gethsemane attached, right by it. So that was a location that was very familiar to Jesus, right next to it. Now, here's something that's very interesting, too. So I'm going to look at Mark 14:66. Mark 14:66 talks about the high priest's palace, and it makes a very unique statement in there about Peter. Okay? At the opposite or the northeastern corner of Mount Zion was the palace of the high priest. Okay? We were looking at that just a moment ago. Back up to it. There's the house of Caiaphas. Okay? Now, it was built on the slope of the hill. And we got to quit. And it was under the principal apartments. Under the principal apartments was a lower story with a porch in front. So when we hear about Peter being beneath in the place, we can understand what it's talking about, because it was built on a slope and it had a porch built, and he could have been underneath that. So when we learn about some of this geographical and architectural understanding of how these things were put together, and we read a statement like that, now we can kind of put it together and understand what they're talking about. But that's kind of interesting. Okay, we covered that. I think we covered it. Covered what I had. Any comments or questions? Someone smarter than me come up with how long? 1.2 miles. You were right, Jim. About a mile. About a mile. So that's a lot of folks. Small town, about a mile. All right, hey, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.